to the topic of being strong and independent. In my opinion, this topic has been somewhat more or less examined by many brothers in YouTube, or more or less across various platforms. But I wanted to take the opportunity to give my perspective from a clinical lens as it relates to how this psychopathology of being strong and independent has actually caused a chasm in the Black community, and it's more or less destroying a community that was once vibrant. And this concept is not only endemic to the Black community, it's endemic to a larger portion of society where this so-called strong and independent woman more or less exists. We're going to examine more or less the definition of strong and independent, because the truth being told, no one is 100% independent but God. So we're going to talk about it because this pathology of being strong and independent has caused a lot of angst in some of our women. And a lot of women are paying the results of it more or less from faulty teaching from their moms, from their grandmothers, and also from pain and hurt of the past. The reason why I wanted to do this, because I've seen a lot of pain in some of the women I dealt with, not only in therapy, but just in conversation. And I want to look at this thing using collaborative empiricism. That's a terminology that we use in the clinical world, or more or less exploring the evidence to more or less determine, is there a such thing as a strong and independent woman? I call it the stir of Eve, the Eve trap. I call it the Eve trap because Eve, whether you believe Eve was a real woman or a fictitious woman, Eve lost her place trying to find her place, never to find her place again. I'm going to say it again. Eve, she lost her place trying to find her place, never to find her place again. And the reason why I call it the Eve trap, because Eve went outside the dominion of her husband, which was Adam. And there was beauty in the unison of Eve and Adam when they were walking together as one. Whether you deem this story to be fictitious, whether you deem it to be something allegorical or even a fairy tale, that's irrelevant. But the truth still remains that Eve, when she was under the guidance and the love and the protection of her husband Adam, there was paradise on earth. Something that was a relic of the past in the Black community, something that's more or less dissipated more so now than never a time I can remember in human history. We got nearly 73% of our kids being born out of wedlock in the Black community. And they're also being born out of wedlock in the white and Latin community as well. But since we are a minority, this is an epidemic or a crisis that needs to be discussed and needs to be dealt with. It's a thinking error that I call magnification and also minimization. I would say magnification to the point where some of our women feel like they can do it alone by themselves. And many are actually suffering in silence, trying to carry a burden they were not designed to do. And then the minimization is the exclusion of not having that man in their life, which has led many to depression, anxiety, being overweight, or being frustrated and angry and bitter because they step outside of a domain that was never designed to be in the first place. As I look at my notes and as I look at the information provided, let's look at the difference between independent versus dependent, because this is a thinking error that needs to be addressed. It's a thinking error that needs to be addressed, and I've been once again wanting to do this for a while. So let's look at the concept of independent versus dependent. Let's look at it. Let's look at independent versus dependent. All right. So, independent, free from outside control, not dependent on another's authority. This is what we call sovereignty as it relates to government and as it relates to land. If you look at this form of independence, that's more of a macro level thing. America sought independence from the British, but we're not talking about that. The independence that a lot of our women, and more or less some American women more or less try to encapsulate or participate, is the independence of not depending on another person for livelihood of sustenance. Meaning she's not going to depend on a man for anything. And the old trope goes, I'm strong and independent and don't need a man, which is a thinking error once again called magnification and also minimization. And see, this kind of thinking, once again, is paradoxical. Because on one hand, some of our women and some American women say, I don't need a man. But yet, when there are times of crisis, they rely on men for various things. I submit and I stand to you in a firm spirit of authority and respect. As a man, I need other men to help me move forward in society. As a clinician, I need the skillsmanship and the labor of other men to help me. The only person that's 100% independent is God. I'm going to say it again. The only person that's 100% independent is God. God is self-sustaining and self-sufficient if you believe in God. If you don't believe in it, then it doesn't apply to you. But the only person that's 100% self-sufficient and self-sustaining is God. And even God, if you believe in the Judeo-Christian ethic of God, he's comprised of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, meaning they're interdependent. And so this kind of thinking has really been birthed out of pain from some of our women. And some of them did it by happenstance, meaning, mom didn't have a father and mom didn't have a husband. And sometimes some men of the past were abusive with finances, but that was not more or less all. So by happenstance, she had to do what she had to do to take care of her family and to take care of her children. So I get that. But some women did it out of rebellion, similar to what Eve did when she lost her place, trying to find her place, never to find her place again. And in the lens of theology, she became engulfed by what's called the pride of life. She wanted to have power outside of her husband. She saw a facade, or she more or less saw a world where she could have knowledge and power outside the love and the protection of her husband, called Adam. And then she had the lust of the flesh. The more power that I get, the more powerful that I will become. Something that a lot of our women do now. They lead with degrees instead of leading with their femininity, which is more or less the right thing to do. But this whole concept of being strong and independent has more or less been a burden for a lot of women. And many won't talk about it because they have too much pride to deal with it. But this psychopathology is damaging to the hearts and the minds of a lot of women. Taraji P. Henson talked about the so-called trope of the strong and independent woman. And this so-called strong and independent woman has led a lot of women in a state of ill repair and a state of desperation. The truth is, one can send 1,000 to flight, but two can send 10,000 into flight. And when men and women work together in unison, when we work together as a team, when the woman is cooperative, as her husband is the lead, and they work together, and when he, loves her and provides for her, but also die for her if needed, that's a beautiful manifestation of the Godhead on earth, if you believe in the Judeo-Christian ethic. But, I wanted to talk about this because, once again, many brothers have more or less broached this topic. And I've always wanted to give my own, interpretation or my own leeway about what's going on as it relates to this particular thing. Back in the 70s, there was what I call an epidemic where there was about 26% of kids being born out of wedlock, which at that time was deemed to be a crisis. But however, now it's a lot worse. Back in 2015, it was deemed to be 73% of kids being born out of wedlock or in single parent homes. But now it's close to probably damn near 80%. So how can we build a vibrant Black community where our women say, I want to be loved and protected, and our boys need guidance? Because I don't care what anyone say, boys need the guidance and the love and the admonition of their fathers in order to be masculine men. Sadly, I think a lot of our women can't respect, masculine authority, or more or less respect some of our Black men, and also in the white communities too, because they've never seen a strong Black masculine father. They've never seen order, because masculine men bring order to families, which in essence brings provision, which in essence brings protection. But it comes with a price. You're not going to corral a masculine man because he's not going to tolerate it. Masculine men are visionaries. They provide, they die, which is the greatest gift that a man can give a woman, which is his life. And I'm concerned about it because when I taught school, I saw this psychopathology. And also as a clinician, I've seen it as well. And so I wanted to more or less challenge these cognitions. I wanted to more or less challenge these negative thought processes, because in the clinical world, we actually call it negative thinking, or more or less cognitive distortions. A cognitive distortion is the perception of something when in reality it isn't there. And instead of showing a level of humility, some of our women continue to go on this default or more or less defunct programming, unwilling to change their position because of pride and because of faulty thinking, which in essence have led to a crumbling Black community that's getting worse, in my opinion. And I say this because I say it in love, and I say it with conviction. We will never get back to a vibrant community until some of our women do a lot of self-introspection. Some will do it, some won't do it. But I'll say it again, masculine men will not tolerate. They would not submit their sovereignty as men in a home and an environment where they're not respected. The essence of love for a man is respect. If a woman wants the love of a man, she got to respect him. That's his version of love, not fickle emotions that come and go. Men need to be respected in order to feel empowered to do the right thing. And the reason why I say a lot of our women have been empowered to be depowered, because the whole construct of feminism was not the Black woman's burden. Black men never had the power to impact or more or less impose sanctions on Black men, Black women at the macro level. The macro level is the level in clinical social work that we call policy. And also, as we call more or less politics, and more or less mandates that more or less have been created to destroy. That was more or less a white, middle class, wealthy female issue, but it had nothing to do with Black men and Black women, because Black men and Black women were mules of society. I call it the Mr. complex, or like some brothers call it, books read by Toni Morrison, where Black men were denigrated. And we took a percentage of more or less Black men that were more or less impacted by trauma, and we encapsulated that to all Black men in general. And so I had to talk about it, as many guys have spoken on this topic in the past, but I wanted to give my spin on it from a clinical perspective. Sadly, a lot of our women have been, once again, empowered to be depowered. And I'm going to show you this clip real quick, because this clip is going to more or less magnify what I'm talking about. Hold tight. This clip is going to magnify what I'm talking about as it relates to the epidemic of single-parent homes and the impact on the sustainability of the Black communities. Let's look at this video real quick, and I want you to give me your interpretation, because I think it says a lot. And remember, this was back in 2015.
Almost 3/4 of Black children.
It's at an alarming rate in the African American community. It's a crisis.
It's devastating. 72%.
72%. 72%.
72%.
72%.
More than 72% of children in the African American community are born out of wedlock. That means absent fathers. I wish I had a father who was wrapped involved.
In 1965, Daniel Patrick Moynihan in his report said 29% of African American children being born into out-of-wedlock households was a travesty. So if 29% is a travesty in 1965.
Remember, 29% in 1965.
2013.
Right.
Sociologists, historians, lawyers, and every other professional under the sun, they're studying to try to find out why exactly is this statistic so high.
72% of children being born to in African American communities to single parents is a frightening number. Not because Black women aren't capable, not because it's morally wrong, but because it puts an economic pressure on the Black community that we can ill afford.
I think it's very important that we understand the history and, in many ways, the evolution as to the single-parent home in the African American community, it goes back to pre-slavery days.
In Africa, prior to slave trade started, what you had is basically tight societies. Everybody was linked to the land and linked to a spiritual system. Spirituality affected everything you did.
Single parenthood as a notion was not really present pre-colonization and pre-slavery.
African men brought responsible for rites of passage. So they taught the men how to be a man, and they took them out and they taught them how to hunt, and they were initiation ceremonies. You had a phenomenon where the institutions supported the men being there.
The child was not necessarily property of their parents, it was a property of the family line. So there was no concept of a child sort of being on its own without no connection to anything.
And you know, and that in itself is very telling.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Vibrations. I'm Raven Geary. Today on our program, one of the hottest properties making the top
that in itself is very telling. The individual said something that was very poignant. And she said that the communities more or less supported the autonomy of a man raising and sustaining his family. It was a rite of passage for a man to have the autonomy to sustain his family. But now there's a battle for power in not only in American relationships and also between some white men and white women, but also in Black communities. Instead of having inclusion in power where the man is the head of his home and a woman supports him as they work together as a team, there's an exclusion of power where there's more or less been predicated by indoctrination from liberal thoughts. And because of that, you're seeing boys that are not being raised to be masculine, strong men. We're raising a group of boys that are whining, complaining, and a group of boys that a lot of women hate themselves. So I don't see the vibrancy of the past ever coming back into fruition unless we do a lot of self-analyzation. But sadly, I think it would never happen. Because one of the things I've always said as I started the Manhood Chronicles and also the Cultural Commission is that there are 7 principles for male optimization. One of those principles is family. Family is the pillar or the cornerstone to the fortification of a strong and vibrant community. But when you don't have the stability of a family, when you don't have the guidance, the love, and protection of a father, you have more or less what's called moral and social chaos. So I wanted to give this, my short interpretation of this, because once again, I believe a lot of American women and some of our Black women have been empowered to be depowered. Once again, they have been empowered to be depowered. The myth of a strong and independent woman. Because truly, no person is independent, not even me. The only person that's independent, once again, is God, if you believe in Yahweh. And even he worked together as a team. So remember this, if it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. I want you to enjoy your Sunday. I want you to think about this. Because until we change this type of negative thinking, we will continue to see the moral chaos in our community. Be well.